Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Avoid Duplicates in Marketo Engage. Today we're going to cover a kind of broader topic, meanwhile diving deep into some of the challenges around deduplication. And to kick us off, I mean, there's a few areas why this is really important, right? The first part is, why data hygiene and quality really matters in Marketo, how it impacts your license fee. It does, as we all know. Examples of how we can remove unnecessary data as well from our database. How do we monitor that? And importantly, how do we clean up duplicated data as quick as we can? So I'm your host and your speaker today, James Fletcher, CEO and a Marketo Solutions architect, or in new Adobe terms, solutions master, or whatever I'm meant to be called myself, wizard. So hopefully I can give you some of these tips that we use on a daily basis in order to improve your overall Marketo instance. So for those of you new to JTF marketing, and maybe an email popped into your inbox and you went, who's this lot talking about something that's interesting to me? We work across a range of industries and companies across many use cases, all typically focused for Marketo and Marketo Engage in terms of how do we integrate it, how do we use it, how do we maximize it? So we typically structure our services around three areas: consultancy services, which is as broad and as deep and as wide as you'd like it to be; training and formation of your team. How do we get more experts within your business in order to automate more of your customer journey and improve the way that it currently works? And then also software. So we've built our own software that integrates with Marketo and ultimately helps us in this challenge of deduplication. So you may see some familiar names to you there on the screen. So we know the impact of poor data when it comes to sales and marketing is pretty important, right? So we interrupt personalization capabilities. We've got split lead intelligence. We may even have inaccurate lead scoring, because actually we might have a split score across two different individuals in the database, maybe one created by sales and one created by lead gen. We might also have poor lead quality in terms of missing fields and missing values. And ultimately that costs us money because it's bloating our database size. And now this is really, really important that we focus on this point, because Marketo, as you know, is a database driven by the number of contacts and a license fee that is based on the number of contacts. And the increments can be quite big. And especially if your database is out of control, you will see spikes in license fee. And we don't want that. We want controlled growth of license fee. We want also really engaged people in our database. The most important piece of information there: how do we keep that database clean and keep it up to date? Now, there's a couple of tips here in terms of managing that license fee, and this isn't the theme of today, but it's important. Again, we're constantly facing cuts in budget or scrutiny on how we spend it, and especially when we have a growing license fee and a growing demand for automation, we see this as a bit of a challenge. A couple of things that can help you: remove inactive and unengaged people in your database who aren't converting, who aren't taking action, and make sure that you get those out, because there'll be people in your database who haven't engaged with anything for the last 6 months, maybe 12 months. They are not going to be relevant to you if they're A, not being included in any campaigns, and B, they're not engaging at all. So get them out of the database. Second, define your synchronization rules between Salesforce and Marketo. And actually, this can be a cause of duplicates within the database, so we'll touch on that a bit later. Analyze your wins and losses to focus on who really does buy from you, and cut all of the other data out if you can, early days, or profile it to better understand it. And then review your Marketo maturity and capabilities. So understand, what are you doing now with the technology? What more can you do with it? And what might that look like? And we do offer a free audit. So if you're interested in that, throw in a message into the chat or just hit me up after this webinar. So one of the toughest parts of Marketo is understanding the data within the database, because Marketo, in all its glory, doesn't always give us the shiniest of dashboards. And I hear you all sniggering the other side without any microphones. This is one of the challenges of understanding data and data quality in Marketo. Now, we've built a data visualization tool for Marketo to understand the database. What quality have I got? What kind of structure have I got? and I'll show you an example of that shortly as well. And again, we've got a free data report that's available to you. So if you'd like to get that connected, then let us know and we can get you hooked up with that. And it'll give you a bit of insight into how good is your data, where are you based on your license fee, and how do we then offer you some opportunities to improve that overall data quality. Now I'm going to jump straight into the demo, and I'm going to start with Marketo. So I don't have to talk to you through the UI of Marketo, I'm sure, but down my left-hand side, I've got a folder here called integrations with a integration of Aromerge, which is the software that we've built here at JTF Marketing. Now I've named it cleanse because I'm cleansing duplicates within my database. My smart list is pretty simple. I've just got duplicate fields by email address, the same as the system smart list, but this will become very useful to me later on. Now, under my people list, thanks to good old GDPR and data protection, you won't not be able to see the email addresses on this view that I've created, but you'll be able to see a list of people where there are clear duplicates. Now, I know they're all email duplicates because I put them in the system earlier. Now, one thing that might be quite useful for you guys is to actually look at creating a new local asset within this folder and actually creating a new report, which is a people performance report. Now, actually, what we're going to do in this report, I'm just going to create it. You can rename it later. So we're actually going to set up the groupings to use acquisition source. So you'll see if you click on your report, you'll see how many people created, etc. Now, if you jump over to setup, and what we're interested in here is actually the original acquisition source. And now the good old Marketo system. I'll keep up with my typing. There we go, acquisition program. You might also choose on this to create original source. I'm just going to use my acquisition program first of all. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to see the sources of my duplicates. So I'm just going to change it to all time. I'm going to see where they're coming from. Now, as I say, you can use acquisition program. You can also use original source type. Which sometimes is more interesting, especially if you see duplicates coming from Salesforce itself. But the most important part here is under your smart list is to actually use the duplicate filter. There we go. Duplicate fields is, and again, email address. Now you've got the other options in there as well. Now under the report, we should now start to see groups of campaigns. Now, this is quite interesting always, depending on where you're acquiring your data and how people are being created in your database. So again, ones that would be quite useful to look at again is original source type. So let's go ahead and just clone this. And we'll just call it dupes by original source type. Now, this is important because it's going to give you some more information beyond the campaign piece about where are these people coming from. So again, we're going to jump over into setup. We're going to change it here, original source type. And then if I jump back over to my report again, once Marketo keeps up with us, we'll start to get some of that information. So we can see here, 38 people come through Service API, 75 from Salesforce, and 121 from the good old list import. So we now know where are these coming from. So we can now start to address some of those duplication issues by focusing on the sources. Now that doesn't help us really with what we've got in our database. So if I go back to my smart list, we'll see on my smart list, I actually have, I think it's 265 people. There you go, 265 down the bottom corner, duplicate records matched by email address. Now you can use other fields in terms of matching them, and you may find it useful to even create custom strings, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. Now, the problem with deduplication in Marketo is it's a pretty manual process. So we really have to find a way of automating it. And if you've ever done it through the UI, you'll know that this is your actions. We're going to go through and merge people, and then we'll get the option to then choose the winning fields or the failing fields. And that can take some time. Now, we decided we were going to automate this process using a tool that we've built called Aromerge. Aromerge basically integrates to Marketo using an API user and processes the data using the newest record into the oldest record. And I'll show you a bit more about that in a second. First thing I want to show you is the data hygiene report. So once we've got Marketo connected to Aromerge, we can actually come in here and start to look at our data set. So we'll see what is the current database size, what is the license fee. And as you can see, I'm about 30,000 over my license fee in this test account. We can start seeing the number of people that are unsubscribed, who are bouncing, the number of private email addresses, duplicates. And this is just giving me more and more information about my account to understand what can I do in order to improve that data. And if you don't know what to do with each one of these groups, more than happy to walk you through those in terms of what can you do. Now, the important one for us is actually start looking at deduplication. Now, within Aromerge, once you've got your Marketo instance set up, there's a couple of steps in order to enable always-on deduplication. The first thing to do was create that static smart, that smart list in the operational program in Marketo and copy the URL into this field. And that will give us the smart list that we're targeting. Now, the way Aromerge uses the API, we've got to give it a list of people we want it to process. That means that we can actually come in and filter this smart list by adding exclusion lists potentially of people we don't want to go through the deduplication process, or actually exclude people from the process altogether. Now we've got a couple of options here: dedupe by email address or custom unique identifier. So when I talked about using custom identifiers and deduplication, we've got to create those in Marketo. Now that might be a string of different things. Let's say it's surname, postcode, email address, or surname, company name, email address, whatever it might be, whatever the combination of things are for you in order to identify a unique record. Again, once we've built that into Marketo, we can run this through, and the way that Aromerge would work is processing those duplicates based on that exact key matching. Now, the way that the merge will work using Aromerge is the newest into the oldest record. So it means always the newest information will win. So if someone comes along and says, my name is Jim Fletcher rather than James Fletcher, Jim will now become the newest record. And that is the default behavior of the API when we're processing records in this way and on bulk. The next thing we've got is a bit of a control around how many duplicates can we process in any one day. Now, in most circumstances, you'll have 50,000 API calls. So I would always recommend going around 30,000 as a maximum in order to control how many duplicates are you processing and not to interrupt any of your integrations that you currently have in Marketo. The next option we've got available to us is the merge in CRM option. Now, merge in CRM only works for Salesforce at this point in time. It's the only capability we have through the Marketo API in order to process those deduplications. And that will allow us to clean up Salesforce at the same time. Now, there's a big asterisk next to that, which is basically all depends on the permissions of your Salesforce sync user. So it's always worth getting introduced to your CRM admin if you're not aware of who they are, and get them on board with this process of cleaning up and always on cleanup, because they have the exact same challenge in Salesforce itself. We can then go ahead and save this record. What that's now going to do is save that configuration. And our next step would be to set up a schedule. So how often do we want to do this? Now, we've got a couple of options here. We can either set up a schedule and let it run every day, as I've set it to do here, as I built this test account earlier. Or what I can do is go through and validate my configuration, which I did earlier, which is why you see here 265 records found. And I can also run it now. So let's just walk through the validation results very quickly. We've basically got a dry run process here, which is we're running the matching criteria. So even if it's a custom unique identifier, against your instance, your target list, in order to identify how many unique records will remain. Now, we can't account for all possibilities. So you might have some that aren't processed at the same time. And again, we can look at those as unique cases. But ultimately, what we can see is if we go and run this report, this deduplication, we will then get a report back of how many duplicates will be merged. In this scenario, because I've run a validation, I get 0 duplicates. Now, if I click run now, this will go away to the API and will take around 5 minutes to complete the full activity. So you'll see here on the dedupe history logs, we've got an identified number of records, 265. Now you can see that I just set this up not so long ago. And you can see that we've got a continual identification from the verification runs of 265 records. Now we can see that we've published all the duplicates that are available to us, and we haven't got any errors, which is fantastic. Now, once this has been running for a while, and if it's going to run on a daily basis or a monthly basis, whatever the schedule is going to be, you're going to get some more interesting graphics than I will from this little analytics set that we've just released. And actually, if I swipe here, you can hopefully see this graph, which is a nice screenshot from our developers earlier, which is basically showing how many duplicates have you had over time. And again, you can start to see it level out. There's always going to be a huge peak in the beginning when you first run these, but then you will get a slow bubble across the rest of the time that you're using Aromerge. So what we can see from this graph is actually the number of published dedupes, which is the number of dupes that we've been able to clear. And then secondly, the number of duplicates that are still identified. And what we should see, again, is that limit that we put in place before the 30,000 API calls, actually starting to tick down the list here and work it down over time. So hopefully that'll give you some visualization as well of, well, how many duplicates do we get on an ongoing basis? And if you've automated it in the background, again, how do you report on how many have come in and gone? And one of the things that we see quite often is a challenge around how do I understand what's happened and when has that happened, and importantly, what else can we do in order to reduce those? Again, I think going back to the original source is always really important, which then leads me nicely back to the questions that we've got as well. So how does Aromerge allow you to merge leads and contacts with Marketo records? I can't currently merge SFDC records within Marketo. This has to be done in Salesforce. So that's a great question. This is really reliant on the permissions of the Marketo Sync user. So the way Aromerge works is we're conducting instructions ultimately through the API in order to send it back through the Marketo Sync user. So in the scenario of merging leads into contacts, contacts into contacts, the process is always newest into oldest. It's then lead into lead, which is nice and simple, or Marketo person into lead, because we always merge into the Salesforce record. Then we will go from a lead, we'll convert that lead into a contact. So you've got a contact conversion permission from the lead to the contact. We'll then merge the contact into the existing contact and then remove the new one that we've just created. So that's the kind of process. And again, that's all driven through the API, the way that Marketo natively works with Salesforce, even if you were converting a lead as well. Now, there's a great question here, which is deduplicating in Marketo versus CRM. Is there one better than the other? This is a brilliant question. I always drive from Marketo first. And the reason I do that is because if you do a deduplication from Salesforce, you end up with a loss of data and intelligence from the Marketo side because it doesn't automate the deduplication in Marketo. What it actually gives you is a bunch more of deleted in Salesforce. So I always drive it from the Marketo side. And if we don't have permissions to the earlier question, then what I typically do is do a Marketo only merge and try and keep that running in the background on a daily basis in order to avoid any issues there. And that's definitely a preferred route for a lot of marketers because we don't want to lose any of that historic data. Again, there's some nuances to that, which again, looking at maybe which fields are going to override which is pretty important. Next question I've got is, in the case of Salesforce linked record and Marketo native record, does it matter which is the winner to keep Salesforce Marketo bidirectional sync for that person active. It doesn't, because again, what we're doing in Marketo is merging the two records together. Whichever one wins will have the Salesforce ID and keep the bidirectional sync. So in the case of Microsoft Dynamics, for those of you who have Microsoft Dynamics on the call, we see this as a bit of a challenge in Dynamics, because as soon as the lead's created, we can't do anything about it. We can't merge it through the API, and it becomes a Microsoft Dynamics headache. So often what we recommend is don't sync until you've had a deduplication process run or triggered to be run in order to make sure you've merged the records together before they sync into Microsoft Dynamics. The painful part of cleaning up Microsoft Dynamics integrations is you've got to delete records, which becomes very painful, or leave it merging together in the Marketo instance. The problem with that is when you get two Microsoft Dynamics IDs, they don't merge together. I mean, it's Microsoft Dynamics. That's a different webinar, I think. Next question that's here is, can you default setting that a new record always wins be adjusted? Often we want to keep the acquisition program, created date, lead source, etc. Of the oldest record, but allow data points like first name, company name, etc. to come from the newest record. Great question. I know we've done it before. It requires a little bit of technical fiddling in the background on our side, and it's something we're working on getting in place so that we can choose which field's going to override which, whether it's oldest or newest. Often we find with duplicates as the acquisition program, you've got the influence anyway of each program, but definitely worth a separate conversation, I think, in terms of how might that work for your use case. And again, how can we identify the ones to then maybe update afterwards as well? Next question is, what if the dupes are in both CRM and Marketo? Would you recommend to merge in Marketo plus enable the emergent CRM, or leave that for the CRM team to tackle? I would say if you've got the capabilities and you're comfortable with the data set and the validation rules within Salesforce, i.e. they're not going to interrupt the merging process, I would do both at the same time. I'm a bit of a bull in a china shop when it comes to my own data set. For that, I like to just get it done, because I don't think there's any winner in keeping duplicate data. I think it's important to review, though, however, what are the limitations that you might have from a Salesforce perspective as well. Next one is, what is the common errors when you see using Aromerge? The most common one is lack of permission. So we don't have the permission to convert a lead into a contact or delete a lead or a contact. And this is all the Marketo Sync user. And importantly, I think the conversion of data set is one of the most common. Or we see a random error that comes back from the Marketo API, which basically says, we don't know why this has happened. Maybe try again later. One of the most common things that we see, especially when it's Salesforce linked, is the validation of fields. So let's say in your lead, you don't have a salutation, but in the contact it's mandatory. If we don't have a value, we can't actually merge it together, because when we tried to merge it together using a Salesforce merge, it will say, no, we've got a problem here. And then it takes you a little while to dig into why. So again, back to that earlier point, do you do both at the same time or one by one? I would always try and get them both at the same time. And it might even be that in some scenarios where you have a large volume, you're looking at disabling those validation rules for a short period, running the cleanup, switching them back on again. Again, try and make friends with your CRM admin. I think that will definitely help you get some success there. The final one I've got here on the list, and again, if there's any more, feel free to throw them in, and then I'll jump back to my slides in a second, is Aromerge a self-serving tool that I can integrate and use for data analysis, or do you need to contact a rep to get the tool? So you need to contact us obviously to get access to the tool initially, but you can have self-serve access so that you can go in and configure this and change it around. And we'll obviously be on hand to support you as and when you need it as well. So you can definitely get signed up, and we'll share some more details after this webinar on how to do that. Now, just to jump back into Marketo, I'm going to come in and refresh my little duplication list. And now we can see the magic happening, which is we've now cleaned up our deduplication, which is great because it means that now I don't have any duplicate records in my database. Now, one thing to note is any of these reports that we've built, of course, will now no longer show any duplicates because we were using duplicates to filter on those lists. And of course, the Marketo cache will always keep me on my toes. So as we then work towards the final minute that we've got, again, any additional questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. Hopefully I've answered them all. There is a great guide that we've put together. That's a non-biased opinion, of course, around data management for Marketo Engage. Again, if you can't wait for us to send out the email after this, go to jtfmarketing.co/resources down the bottom here in order to get that download. And it's got all the information and more from what we've talked about today. So I suppose to wrap up, why Aromerge, why JTF Marketing? We have built Aromerge specifically around our knowledge of the API, the way it works, the processes, which a lot of our clients are using. We've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this always-on concept of this problem never goes away. It seems to continue to be a bugbear for many admins. And it's really important to set something up that's always on so that you're not spending day after day cleaning up errors, which should be prevented ideally by Marketo, right? In an ideal world. But importantly, how do we understand the visualization of that data set as well as important, give you those insights on how do you manage that license, how do you improve data quality. We can definitely help you build out these programs for deduplication, for data management in general. We've got a fairly well-tested standard approach to those, which will cover pretty much every eventuality. And of course, we're Marketo certified experts, so we can help you maximize that investment and make sure that the things that you're trying to achieve with Marketo are going to be possible, but through good quality data, first of all.